Okay. Bid preparation, according to ISM. So we're back to our sourcing cycle again. We're searching for potential sources, so we got to send out some bids. And again, ISM calls them solicitations like the government does. And they're bids, quotes, proposals, pertinent specs, terms, and conditions. So method of communicating attributes of a product or service. A description of the technical requirements, otherwise known as a spec. 2 components, what the product must look like or do, and the quantitative frequency measures such as PPM, mean time between failures, process capability, that kind of stuff. Usually most of this stuff is found in our drawings, but if you don't have a drawing, it's a proposal, then you need to get the TRS technical specification requirements. Engineering is the one that's got to tell you how to do that. They're the ones that got to give us the requirements for the product. Acceptance criteria defines the specification the product must meet upon delivery. Think of this as PPAP. Criteria will be measured at incoming inspection. So if you're in a smaller company that's very technical, like you're making tubes that measure parts per million in solution or something like that, and you got hastelloid metal and some really weird stuff, you'll probably have incoming inspection. We're not going to do it in a company like this. We'd need an army of people. It'd take forever. Performance and design specs defines what the product must do. So performance or design specification. When performance specs are used, the supplier usually has a maximum latitude to determine how to go about satisfying the requirement. So this is how we do our radiators. We give the Mala or Titanex, the 2 companies that make radiators for us, our engine cooling specs, either from Cummins or from our MX. And we tell them how much space they got underneath the hood to build the radiator. And then they design it to those engine specifications in that space claim. So that's a performance spec. A design spec is a drawing, basically. And it's a build to print. Often define the process, specify the materials. It's a build to print. You can still submit an SRDC, but you're pretty tightly controlled. We want it built this way. Internal versus external. Internal specs are specs that the company has adopted for use within the company, and external specs are set by the industry or government. So supplier samples, a physical sample can serve as the specification, especially if you're doing like a color spec or something. If this is the case, then the spec needs to reference the sample. Scope of work or statement of work contains the specific services or work activities the supplier is expected to perform. So you've all seen these statement of works and non-disclosure agreements. You guys have all seen those. So communication methods, performance specs, design specs, statement of work, external specs, and supplier samples. There's a description of each, but we've kind of gone over them. Mostly what we see is design specs, they're drawings. Certain desks have performance specs. And then every once in a while you run into a statement of work. All right, types of bids. Corporate industry often referring to document as an RFX. So it can be an RFI, RFQ, RFP. Offers to buy versus offers to sell. So a contract, in order to be legal, has to have an offer and an acceptance. So a PO could be either an offer to the supplier to buy a product or an acceptance by the buyer of the supplier's offer to sell a product. Usually we consider it to be an offer. Purchasing usually solicits suppliers' offers to sell. This permits the company to retain the power of acceptance. So we used to have an acknowledgement that the supplier would have to send back for the PO. That gets to be problematic when you're doing as many POs as we do. So if the supplier acts like there's a contract, they ship us the parts, then there's a contract. Informal bids or quotes, usually referred to telephone, written, or electronic. This is what's known as an RFI. Used for budgeting, dollar values are less than pre-established monetary limit, also referred to as an engineering estimate. Competitive proposals, initiated by an RFP. Submission of proposals by a maximum number of suppliers, provides for discussion, concludes with an award. If you're doing an RFP, a lot of these responses can be 100 pages. So unless you want to be there all night reading all this junk, don't go for more than about 5 suppliers. Sealed bids, construction uses them, the government also uses them. So you submit your bid in a sealed envelope, and the envelopes are opened at an appointed time. And there's no discussion. It's whoever the lowest price gets the business. Restricted competition, specialized resources, regulatory issues, lack of competition in geographical areas, that type of thing. Non-competitive negotiations, it goes with restricted competition. Specs are not complete. Use of performance specs may require negotiation with one supplier, and one supplier is clearly superior to the rest. All those reasons for not having competition. And then a 2-step bidding. So if you got inadequate specs, you've got a TRS that isn't quite finished and engineering needs some ideas on how to finish it. Step 1, suppliers submit technical proposals without pricing. So that's really for engineering to figure out what direction they want to go. Then they update the TRS, and then step 2 is you send out the proposals in an RFP, the updated TRS. So that's a 2-step bidding. And then alternative innovative proposals. So there's no single best way to write an RFP usually. Not all forms of bidding are applicable to all countries and all situations. So usually where you run into these alternative proposals is the suppliers don't want to be measured on price alone, so they combine stuff. And you usually run that in an RFP or a proposal with a performance spec. With a drawing, not so much, because it's like build to print. Pricing models or market baskets. So there's a couple ways for a supplier to set for price. So they can do the sum of material, labor, overhead, profit, which is the cost model, or they can do market value. So this assumes that the market value is higher than the cost price. So they don't really care, it costs us this much, but we can get this much for it on the market. The market basket approach, prices compared to indices. If their indices are a good representation. So Labor Department CPI and PPI use market baskets of goods. They calculate monthly industries, and they're available to the public. You got to be kind of careful though, because some of these industries only have 2 or 3 companies in them, and they bounce around a lot. Lotting strategy. This is online bidding. Remember, lotting is online bidding. Reverse auctions and online bid strategies. They're best done with standard items, office supplies, that type of thing, MRO. RFP we covered. The RFQ, build to print. And then they have something called a request for qualifications. This would be an RFI to me. Provides information about their capabilities and the company. And then bidders conferences. Getting suppliers together in person, usually not on a conference call, possibly. to explain the RFP. Used for complex bidding situations, so maybe some powertrain stuff. And sourcing team meets with all potential suppliers, covers all the documents. And then you got to select the attendees and potential benefits. You get good two-way communication, and you get a look into any discrepancies that are in your spec or your RFP. Overuse may discourage some suppliers from attending, and suppliers may not like attending with their competition. Those are the two drawbacks to it. General bidding procedures and concepts. So comparability. All suppliers need to have the same information, and ideally you want them all to present their bid in the same format. Fairness and ethics. Assume supplier with least cost, highest value gets the award. I mean, with a private industry like Packer, it's not always the case, but I mean, generally we're here out to save money. And then need to notify suppliers if they're not successful. A lot of times when I work with engineering, I would let the engineer talk to the supplier that won, because everybody likes doing that. And I would call all the guys that didn't win, because nobody likes doing that. General format or content, spec of some type, quantity, how the response needs to be submitted in any required format, when the items will be shipped, due dates, expression of interest may be used as a preliminary step. So I've done that before when I've got a really sketchy kind of spec, and I'll send what I've got out and say, if you're interested in quoting on this, let me know by this date. Fair response time. Usually you got to give a special supplier 3 to 4 weeks to make a price. And then bid timelines and milestones. These are in your RFP templates. And T's and C's. Oftentimes, if it's a new supplier, I'll send the T's and C's out with the RFP. So types of T's and C's. You got standard T's and C's, which, that's what all our boilerplate stuff is. And then you've got customer T's and C's. So our customers may have T's and C's that we need to meet. The supplier is also going to have T's and C's. But we just say, hey, we're purchasing, use ours. Surety bonds, a promise by a guarantor to pay one party, the obligee, a certain amount if a second party, the principal, fails to meet some obligation, such as fulfilling the contract. So usually used in construction or government contracting. A bid bond guarantees that if the bid is awarded to a specific bidder, that the bidder will accept the contract and provide the product. If the bidder refuses, the extra cost of going to another supplier are borne by the insurer. So that's a bid bond. And then a performance bond guarantees delivery of goods that meet specifications used in construction. Payment bond, insures against non-payment. So these are all usually used in the construction industry. Bid bonds, performance bonds, surety bonds. Bid deposits, amount to liquidated damage, which the buyer would be entitled to if the supplier does not perform. Letters of credit, we've already talked about. Real estate, buyer could acquire assets placed in escrow as a form of surety. You can always put down cash, and then earnest money is if you've ever bought a house. That's a kind of a surety bond. Okay, problems occurring in the bid process. Time extensions and amendments. All the suppliers need to be granted the same time extension and access to bid changes equally. And late bids without an extension make clear the consequences of a late bid, like we're not going to consider it. Offers with errors or omissions. So you got to give the supplier an opportunity to cancel or withdraw the bid if they mess it up. Courts allow withdrawing bids for clerical errors or if the supplier was not negligent. And if the supplier really wants to withdraw the bid, then you can't. I mean, he's not going to probably ship anyway, so, move on. Conflicts of interest. So a buyer can't have a financial interest in the supplier that the business is awarded to. Confidentiality, you need to have NDAs in place before you send out the RFX. Alternate proposals, how are you going to handle those? You want to set a policy in your group on alternate proposals and procedure for bid cancellation. Notify bidders in writing as soon as possible. You got to call them on the phone too. Make sure they know if the bid's been canceled. All right. Which of the following is a generally accepted reason for limiting competition by soliciting a bid from only one supplier? Well, I think you can throw out A and C. That leaves us with B and D. Any guesses? This one was mentioned in the slides, but this one sounds pretty good to me. I think I'd go with D. What about you guys?
Yeah, D.
Let's see what they say. D it is. What did they have to say about B? It's incorrect because in today's environment of electronic communication, rapid transit, supplier does not have to be in the immediate geographical area. Well, why'd you say it on a slide then? Anyway, next question. Supply professional is seeking competitive bids on 700 standard parts. Comparing bids on a part-by-part basis would be very time-consuming. The supply professional feels the effort would not be a good use of time. I would agree. Which of the following would be the least appropriate method to utilize? So the least, the one that doesn't belong. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think A through C kind of group together. But D sounds like a good answer to me.
D. Yeah, D.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Random.
tempted. Yeah, random. Yeah, that's probably not the way you want to do it. See what these guys say. Yeah, ample empirical data. Yeah, because it says it has that random in there. All right, so there's 8 questions out there on the web. You guys pull them down, and we will get together. Well, see how many you can get through. We'll go over answers at 2:25. All right, you may not have finished, but I'll post the answers. Let's go over some of them here. All right, number 1 is Bravo. It's unethical to invite a potential supplier to spend time at your pre-bid conference when you know you're not going to do business with them. 2 is Alpha. Preparing a proposal consumes supplier resources. There's costs attached, so sound practice dictates that the supplier is notified as soon as practical, both in writing and call them up. 3 is Delta. All 4 sources of information are important. 4 is Alpha. Keeping bidders or offers names hidden until contract minimizes the risk that confidential information may be leaked. And 5 is Charlie. Pre-solicitation conferences are typically used when buying organization wants to review specs. I disagree. I would have used the 2-step bidding conference, but what didn't they like about that? 2-step bidding refers to the process of evaluating technical responses first, then costs. Isn't that what you're talking about? Well, I guess technically not. Option Delta for 6. Payment bond will protect Acme from liens. So these bond types are, I mean, the name's kind of in it. 7. Oh, here's 7. Option C, lotting strategies, which are online bidding. And 8 is Delta. Obviously going to have to allow ABC enough time to complete their quote. All right, any questions?
I have a question about NDA. I'm pretty sure direct purchasing will always require supplier to sign NDA, but in indirect purchasing, I don't know when NDA is needed.
Well, if you're just going to do some kind of lotting strategy or online bidding or something like that on their specifications, like we're not giving any specs to them, then you don't probably need one. But if you're going to give any kind of information from PACCAR, like a specification or a drawing or any other information about PACCAR to them, then you probably need an NDA. So if you're just buying office supplies, we don't spec office supplies, it's all their spec. You probably don't need an NDA to do that. If you're doing HR, if you're doing something for HR, because you're going to have to give information about the firm, then yeah, you're going to need an NDA.
Sorry, you need to give information about the firm?
Well, if in the proposal, you might have to, when you're talking to the suppliers. They might want to know, what kind of thing you're doing for HR, 401k plan or something like that, then I would have an NDA. Okay.
Because I kind of see like even janitorial services needs to sign NDA, but some other, like the renovation, one of the contractor for the renovation project here in Kenworth, they don't need to sign NDA. So
yeah, I wouldn't for a renovation program because they're not going to be exposed to. They're not going to be exposed to anything confidential or shouldn't be.
Okay.
It's just a question of, are they going to view any PACCAR confidential information, or could they possibly view PACCAR confidential information? If the answer is yes, then you should do an NDA with them.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. Talk to you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks.